What's up, everyone?
Hello.
Welcome back. Another episode of FGC Behind the Smoke podcast.
Smoke, baby.
I'm your co-host, Adamo.
And I'm Boris.
And behind the screen, we have our podcast guru, proactive podcast guru,
Yeah.
Francesco.
PPG. OG.
Our boy.
Yeah.
Right on. Welcome back, everyone. What's our topic today?
Today we've had multiple topics because for those of you that don't know, we crush out like 3 or 4 of these episodes
A day,
and then we'll post them, weekly.
Yeah.
So if you see me wearing the same tracksuit and shirt, that's why.
Yeah. That's 100% why. It has nothing to do with the fact that he doesn't have any other clothes.
Yeah.
He swears.
But yeah, today we're bringing you just kind of our opinion on some of the most common interview questions you're going to get. So you decided you want to be a firefighter, you've gone through the process, you're lucky enough to finish the written, and now you're going to go to the interview panel. So we're just going to give you a heads up on some of the potential questions that you may see in your panel interview.
Yeah, like there's kind of a common list of questions that get asked. They can be asked in like a couple different ways too, right? But you're always going to have those common themes of like a conflict question, a time you had to make a difficult decision.
Yeah, let's just dip into it right now. So let's start with the first one you said there, conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can guarantee you like some form of this question will be in your interview, right? A common one is like, can you tell us about a time that you had a conflict with a coworker, what happened and how you resolved it?
Yeah.
A big thing to remember too with these questions, or with your answers at least, you want your answer to be something positive, right? Like you want it to be resolved in a positive way, right? If your answer is like, oh, I had this issue with my coworker, we didn't see eye to eye, so we just avoided each other, and that's how we made it work. Like that's not really a good example, in my opinion.
No, and it all has to relate back to the fire service. So the reason somebody's asking you that question in your panel interview is, are you going to be able to work with that person at the fire hall? If you have a conflict with a supervisor, a coworker, subordinate, are you going to be able to, first of all, find a solution, and second, work with that person again?
Yeah, exactly. And like there's so many different personality types within the fire service. You're going to be working with a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and you're not always going to see eye to eye with someone, but can you at least be civil enough to work together and make it work, right?
Yeah. So do expect some type of conflict question on your panel interview. And like Adamo said, you want it to have a positive ending, positive end result. The worst thing you can say is like, yeah, we never talked again, or yeah, I quit that job, or I fired that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, what they're looking for in this is, do you have like good communication skills that you can, respectfully and maturely resolve a conflict with someone that you have?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What else do you think we find lots of times on the panel interview?
A time that you had to make a difficult decision.
Right. So anytime, basically decision making, what was the hardest decision you made? What was the decision you made that had a negative impact or had a positive impact on your team?
Yeah.
So yeah, decision making questions that go into your character and your ability to solve those things.
Yeah, and I think with those, I think with all the interview questions, it kind of shows a lot, like I said earlier, about your communication skills, but also your personality, your maturity level, like the standard that you hold yourself to.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I can almost guarantee you're going to get some form of that question. Right.
Yeah. And the interview panel, one thing to remember too is we spoke about this in a previous episode, but your interview panel may have a combination of a union rep, an HR rep, a chief, a captain, a recruiting captain. It could be any one of those people. So your audience is different. The answer that potentially a chief may like, the HR rep might not like.
Yeah.
So you have to ensure that your answer is tailored for the entire panel and not just one specific type of person listening to your story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another common question that you'll probably get is something that involves teamwork, whether it's a time that you let your teammates down, or a time that you had to come together as a team to, reach a common goal, right? If it is like a negative, let's say, for example, like, can you tell us about a time that you let your team down? Talk about like what you learned from that. Like, how were you able to grow from that experience? You know, what you learned from it, you know, whether you made a mistake or whatever it is, like how you can maybe fix that if that situation were to come up again.
Yeah, I think the best way that I've kind of tried to explain it to people is whenever it's a positive thing, so a time you did well, a time you successfully were part of a team, a time you did a great thing at your work, talk about other people. But when it's something negative, like time you let your team down, time your actions had negative consequences, talk about yourself.
Yeah.
You know, so take heat for the negative things and give praise to others for the positive things.
Yeah, dude, yeah, I totally agree with you on that, right? And also by doing that, it shows that you can take ownership for your mistakes and that you're not just going to blame others for, you know, something that you had control over.
Yeah. And if you do, then that's a red flag for the interview panel.
Yeah, 100%. So what about you, Boris? Like what other common interview questions do you find? I mean, especially with you being on an interview panel, do you often switch your questions up or?
I do. I feel like there's roughly about 100, 120 questions that kind of pertain to firefighting in total, really, that you want to kind of ask. But I think the ones that most fire departments ask are, you know, why you want to be a firefighter or why this particular municipality, you know, those core inner questions that you need to know without studying.
Yeah.
You know, my favorite one that I like having on my panel is why should we hire you?
Yeah.
You know, you shouldn't have to study for that answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you should know yourself well enough and know your reason for wanting to be with that department. Like,
Totally.
you know, make it personal to you too, right? Like, you know, if you're somebody who is super busy and you like being busy and you like, you know, that like kind of fast paced kind of thing, like, you know, tell them that, like, you know, hey, I really enjoy being busy. I like going on calls, whatever, right? And express that to them too, right? Because then they're gonna be like, oh, okay, like, you know what, we're actually a pretty busy department. Like this person might be a good fit here, right?
Yeah, and with that, like know the department you're applying to. If you're applying to one of the slowest departments in your area, you may want to refrain from saying you like to be super busy on calls.
Yeah.
Because not only does it show that there's a misalignment of the department and yourself, but it also shows that you didn't study that department too well.
Yeah. Yeah, you should do your research, right? Like you should go into an interview panel and know as much as you can about that department.
Absolutely.
Right. Another question that gets brought up in interviews is, you know, what can you tell us about this city or this municipality or this department?
Yeah.
Right. If you're sitting there like, you know, you guys go on calls, you guys go to fire, like they're going to be like, well, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like do some research and have some stuff that you know specifically about that department, but also not what you know about that department, but also how it can kind of relate to you a bit and like your personality and like what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It's not only going to give you a better answer at the interview panel, but it's also going to set you up for success when you potentially get hired with that department. You know, if you know that that department's busy and you go to a bunch of calls, that's not going to be a surprise to you. If you know that that department has, you know, an opioid crisis, then you know you're going to be going to overdoses.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a shock, right? Yeah. Always study, you know, what are some hazards in that city? Go to the city's website. What is the city dealing with? What are issues that are important to that city?
Yeah, absolutely. And also knowing, you know, how many fire halls there are and that kind of stuff too. It just shows that you have an interest in that department and that you're not just there because you want a job. You're there because you actually want to be with that specific department, right? It shows that you've done your research. It shows that you care. It shows that you want to be there.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're in multiple processes, there's nothing wrong with, you know, wanting to be in two different departments, but then find things that are specific to that department that draws you to that department.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, this one has a huge dock and sea cans and things like that. And I know there's a lot of hazards with that and has a lot of chemicals and, you know, and this other city is mountainous and there's a lot of, you know, rope and high angle calls and things like that. You pick those things out and talk about that in your interview.
Yeah. Or like if the city that you're in the process with has like a highway going through it, you know, you can talk about motor vehicle incidents and that kind of stuff, right? Show interest in the place that you're applying to, right?
Absolutely. Adamo, what question do you think clients come to us a lot with that they have difficulties with?
Sometimes, I think it's different per client,
Yeah.
right? Like some clients are really good with answering those like situational or behavioral questions,
Mhm.
and they might not be as good as with answering like super basic questions like why do you want to be a firefighter or tell me about yourself,
Right.
right? We've had clients before where it's like, okay, so can you tell me why you want to be a firefighter? And they kind of draw a blank, and it's not because they don't have their reason why. It's because they're so focused on like, well, what does the panel want me to say? It's
Right.
like, no. Like they want to know truly why you want to get into this line of work,
Yeah,
right?
no, that's a very good point. And sometimes clients or people in the interview will just start rattling stuff off from their resume. It's like, no, like we're looking for like what drives you to this career.
Yeah, like what motivated you to get into this line of work, right? Why is this so important to you? And then you can have the opposite too, right? Like people, they can answer those questions fine, but then once it gets to a more in-depth question, they kind of just like freeze, or they start like repeating themselves, or they don't really actually hit like the key points that they want to hit or
Yeah.
that they should hit. So I think it is really like client dependent. It's also, I think it's a lot of it comes with, their experience on their resume as well too, right? Some people have had jobs where, they're pretty high up in a company and they deal with people quite in depthly on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis, so they're really good at that. They have examples of conflict resolution, they have examples of a time that they had to come together to work as a team. I think it depends on the client, but everyone's different, right? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Some people are definitely have an easier time finding answers for those things just through experience,
Yeah,
right? But I always think that the clients just need to know themselves better. Like we've all had issues with a supervisor. Like a supervisor might not necessarily be like a job supervisor. You
yeah,
you can have a coach who's a supervisor.
yeah,
You can have a teacher who's a supervisor,
absolutely.
right? There's no way you have gone 20 plus years of life without a single conflict with somebody that's in a supervisory role.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we say conflict, we're not talking about like you got into like a fight with someone.
Yeah,
It could be
good point.
something as small as like a disagreement on how to get a job done, or, something small that isn't necessarily some blown out conflict.
You should probably not talk about punching your boss out. Like
Yeah,
if it is a
exactly.
conflict that big, you should probably keep that out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like we said, you want to demonstrate that you have that ability to resolve an issue, or that ability to work as a team, or that ability to like accept when you've made mistakes, or to recognize that, what, in this situation, I let my team down because of X, Y, Z. But after that, it really made me realize that these are areas that I need to improve on. So that way, if this were to happen again, I'm prepared on how to like help my team out better.
Yeah, and that comes back to that reactive or proactive firefighter. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's a episode that's going to air after this one or before this one, but definitely tune into that episode as well because
Yeah, it's a good one.
yeah, we talk about that being proactive, and if you had an issue or you did something that affected your team negatively, you need to show how you came back from it and how you were reactive in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some things that you find that people are just thrown off by when it comes to the interview? Like maybe things that they're just not aware of or they're not prepared for?
The most green applicants will have issues with the little things, not showing up on time, which could absolutely tank you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, good luck.
No, not dressing well. You don't have to, have a $4,000 Armani suit, but dress well for the interview, right? Clean shaven,
Yeah.
well groomed, be prepared. Those little things for I think the most green recruits is the first step, and it might be the toughest at the beginning.
Yeah, and like especially if you come from a line of work where interviews aren't really that big. Like if you come from a trades background, it's a huge asset as a firefighter. But I know I came from a trades background where if you wanted to go get a job, you just kind of show up at a job site and be like, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" And they're like, "Yeah, can you show up tomorrow with your steel-toed boots and a void check?" kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so these interviews are very in depth and they're going to ask you a lot of different questions. Some interviews can be like 40 minutes long. Some interviews can be like almost 2 hours long. So it really depends on the department, how many people are in the panel,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't want to say a lot of people, but there is a good percentage of people who, if it is their first interview, they just don't know what to expect. Like they don't know what to be ready for.
Yeah, it's definitely the hardest, I would say, portion of the firefighter process.
Yeah.
It's one thing to get ready for a physical test because that's your body and you know how ready you are, but you can't be ready for the 20 or 15 questions that they throw your way.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can't be as prepared as you are for a physical.
Yeah. And I think too, with like situational questions too, right? Because situational questions are kind of hypothetical in a sense. It's like, what would you do if you saw your supervisor treating another employee unfairly, right? And then I think stuff like that kind of throws people off too, where they're like, I don't know, like, how do I answer this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of our clients do come for, like 90% of our clients are with us for the interview portion because of those types of things. And yeah, it's not easy. The industry is changing at times. You might be getting questions like, what does diversity inclusion mean to you?
Yeah.
And I find that question stumps a lot of people too, but it shouldn't. Yeah, DEI is like a fairly new concept. It hasn't been in interviews 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But people focus on the wrong things, I think. They focus on race, religion, and sex when it comes to DEI.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me, when I ask anything that has to do with DEI, it's like, well, food is a diverse thing. You might only eat meat.
Yeah.
I might be a pescatarian.
Yeah.
Francesco here might be a vegetarian. Like, how do we come together and include each other at a meal at the fire hall?
Yeah, there's so
Right.
many different avenues of that. That's so
Yeah,
true
or
that
like-
you can go down.
Yeah, like a physical thing, right? This person might be a really good runner. This person is really good with weights. How do you come together to work together in a gym and have a circuit?
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that question throws people off too, but like people are just focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And you talked about it earlier with like the situational. They don't know what the interview person wants to hear.
Yeah, and I think that they get too caught up in like, oh, well, what does this person want me to say? And I don't think it's a good way of approaching it. I think you need to be honest with how you would handle the situation, right? And there's definitely right and wrong ways to handle things, but think about it, right? Like it's totally fine in your interview to just take a second, take a breath, think about what you want to say before you say it, right?
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, like when you get into an interview panel, you'll most likely have a glass of water in front of you, a notepad, and the interview panel will let you know, you can take some notes, you can have a drink of water, utilize that. Take a sip of water.
Yeah. Another thing too is I think most interview panels allow you to bring a copy of your resume as well. So if you do get stumped, you can look at your resume just to kind of refresh your memory a bit of like maybe a story that you can tell from a job that you had 4 years ago or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the interview panel, like Damo said, like they don't know you. So you have to bring all these things out. They don't know that, you volunteered the rugby team 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's how you came together as a team and succeeded and won a championship or whatever, right? So have that resume in front of you or know yourself well enough that those stories can come out naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Boris said, like there is probably about 120 different questions that they could ask. But that being said, there are themes, right? A conflict question isn't necessarily like, oh, tell us the time you had a conflict with a supervisor, right? It could be like, can you tell us about a time where, you had an idea that somebody was opposed to and how you were able to, work together to come to like a common conclusion.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Or there would be like a question, tell us the time you had a conflict with a coworker that never got fully resolved.
Yeah.
Well, like how do you deal with that, right?
Yeah.
'Cause maybe you've been practicing that everything gets resolved and everything's good, but that's not life.
Exactly.
Some things don't get resolved and issues linger, but you have to explain that stuff and show your mentality and maturity and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's definitely like the interviews are hard, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've never done one before, or if you have and you find that that's where you're not getting through, like you need to be able to self-reflect.
It's almost worse.
Yeah, totally.
Because people just like, they think they do well the first time and then they get cut and like, oh man, I don't even know what I was doing wrong. And then the next interview is worse and then they just derail.
Yeah. It's definitely a tough part of the hiring process. And the thing is too, is like some people just aren't that good at interviews, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be a bad firefighter.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes for all parts of the process. Like I know, at least in my experience, like a lot of people that do poorly on the written or get lesser marks on the written are actually on the top tier when it comes to physicals.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's just how it is most of the time. So
for sure.
don't judge one applicant just on a specific part of the process, and just know that if you are going through a process, one bad thing may not derail your entire application.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yeah, and the recruiters want to hire you. That's why they brought you into the interview. They want to hear your story. They want you on the department. You just have to give them that chance.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to see if you're going to be a good fit for their department.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and vice versa. Like you're there also trying to get on with that department, but if you hear something that you don't like about that department, or if you're getting treated badly during that process by that department, then you have as much of a right to be like, you know what, this isn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you are in that situation, don't just not show up to the next part of the process that you were invited to. Just send an email. Just say, hey, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm going to have to remove my application from this process. I appreciate the time that you guys put into me, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, don't just like leave them high and dry.
Yeah, no show is never a good thing. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the recruiters, and then potentially if you decide to apply again a couple of years later, it may not work out for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, things come up, right? Like we've had applicants drop out because of personal reasons, financial reasons, family reasons,
yeah,
right? Injuries. It is what it is. Life happens. Thanks for coming. See you potentially next year.
Yeah.
So don't burn any bridges. Don't be a no-show.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we'll see you next year.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who is about to have an interview? Like say they have an upcoming interview. Like what's one piece of advice that you would give to them if you could only give them one thing?
Come talk to us. No.
Yeah. Yeah. That is good advice.
In seriousness though, like know yourself, I would say.
Yeah.
Because if you know yourself and you know your ups and downs, you know your highs and lows, you know times when you perform poorly, you know times that you did well. Any question that the interview panel may ask, you're going to be able to answer.
Yeah.
Any monkey can have the 120 questions.
Yeah.
But how you answer them is what's going to get you through to the other side.
Exactly. Yeah. I fully agree with you on that. 100%.
Nice. We agree on a lot of things.
We do. Yeah. It's nice. It works out well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So like we said, like the interview portion is probably the hardest when it comes to the hiring process.
Yeah. One thing we forgot to touch on that I know a lot of applicants feel is we are always told to be modest, right?
Yeah.
Don't talk about yourself.
Yeah.
You're part of a team. You're not the top dog. And then you go into this interview and now you got to do the opposite for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's because the panel wants to get to know you, right?
Mhm.
They want to hear about your accolades, and they want to hear about like you being potentially you were the MVP on your sports team. Like they want to hear that kind of stuff, right? But I think when you talk about it, just be humble about it. Don't don't get cocky about it, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the things we had in the other episode too, is like arrogance is an easy way to tank your process.
It is. Yeah, it totally is. Right. So, and people see that, people don't really want to work with that personality type either. If you're always going to be so arrogant and think that you're the best at everything you do, you're going to get a bit of a reality check.
Yeah. Know yourself, work hard, know the department, come talk to us. Those are all great things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is with this episode, like this episode could be like 4 hours long if we wanted it to be, because there is so much to talk about, but we don't want to do those long form podcasts because people tend to tune out, right? So if you do have an upcoming interview or you want to get prepared for a potential interview, just reach out to us. You can go to our website, firefightersglobal.com. You can message us on Instagram at firefightersglobal, or you could even just email us at info@firefightersglobal.com. Hey everyone, we just wanted to take a moment quickly to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is CanCon Construction. CanCon is located in Abbotsford, BC. CanCon specializes in heavy machinery for construction sites, such as backhoes, excavators, and so on. If you're looking to gain experience, or if you already have experience as an equipment operator and you're looking for a new place to work, we highly suggest CanCon Construction. They're one of the best in the business, and they treat their employees like gold. So check them out. You can look at their website at canconconstruction.com. The next sponsor we'd like to thank is Strike Recovery and Performance. Strike is located in Burnaby, BC. They provide physio, chiropractor, and RMTs. I've been personally going to Strike for a few years now, so it's really awesome that they've decided to sponsor our podcast. I've gone to other chiros and physios before, and nothing compares to Strike. Their head chiropractor was actually a chiropractor for the UFC for quite a while, so they have a lot of experience dealing with professional athletes. And as firefighters, you have the potential of getting injured, and they're the people to go see. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like we could talk about this for hours, but if you want more in-depth one-on-one time, just reach out to us.
Yeah, and thank you for listening. And as always, if you have any questions, you can send them our way as well through all those avenues that Damo talked about.
Absolutely. So good luck, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.